So a little while back, I did a video about Super Rugby's attendance and compared it to some of the European leagues. I thought, based on some of the comments, people were interested in the Rugby Championship and the Six Nations. Let's have a look at the Six Nations and see kind of which countries are getting the best attendance numbers and how does that relate to the capacity of their stadium. And how about the competition overall? Is it growing? Is it declining? Or is it pretty steady? So rather than just go a couple of years, I've decided we'll have a look at the last 5, although the 2020 season is still incomplete. We'll still include those numbers and we'll see how things are looking. There are definitely trends and I guess also some questions about the way the counting is done. But we'll get to that in a minute. We'll start with Wales. I'm only going to write the percentage of the capacity on the board, but Wales, as far as I could tell, from 2016 through to 2020, played all their games at the Millennium, which has a capacity of 74,500. And generally, tickets sold pretty well. If you're looking at 2016, the average attendance was 100%. Again, it's rounded up. It was like 99 point something, but it rounds up to 100%. 2017 is also 100%. 2018 dips a little bit to 96%. That year, Wales finished second, but they were on the back of a season where they had finished 5th. So maybe it's the preceding season. It's that season where maybe fans were a bit burned. I don't know. Again, it's only 4%. And then 2019 is back up to 100%. Kind of a Grand Slam year. It's not surprising. And then 2020 thus far, we are at 96% for Wales. So pretty good numbers, you'd have to say, all around. Average 71,193 being that lowest one in 2018. So have a look at 2018's fixtures. Where did it kind of cost them? Maybe it was one game against Italy, second game that they played at home, and they only got 65,242 through the door. So that average attendance, or the attendance for that game, was 88% of capacity. So that dragged things down. The other 2 games against Scotland and France were both almost sold out. So it's that one game that's dragged things down. And to be fair, same is true with 2020. Their first game against France, second game against France was almost sold out. The first game against Italy was 92%. So the Six Nations always gets kind of talked up about having great consistent attendance. I was curious to see what the Italian factor is like on some of these teams in terms of both their home and their travelling attendance. So for the most part, across the last 5 years, Wales generally sells every game out, except the one against Italy. And it was 99% against France in 2020. So not quite sold out, but pretty much consistent. Next, for Ireland. And it's pretty easy because every single one of these is 100%. There's no variation whatsoever. I guess they do have the smallest capacity. Someone will have to enlighten me because the Aviva's capacity is listed online as 51,700. And that was the attendance for 16, 17 and 18. But for 19 and 20, it was 50,100. So I've still given them 100% because there must be a capacity reduction that was going on, but I couldn't find any news about it. But 100%. Interestingly, for every single game, there's no difference in the number of fans that attended. So, for example, 2016 against Wales, 51,700. Against Italy, 51,700. Against Scotland, 51,700. So I'm assuming maybe they're calculating that based on tickets sold rather than people going through the turnstiles, because there's always going to be a handful of people sick on the day, or car breaks down. There's going to be some people who don't make their way to the game even if they bought a ticket. So I'm guessing maybe they did their calculations based on ticket sales. For Wales, there seems to be a bit of variation in the numbers, apart from 2016 when they all had the same numbers. So maybe Wales was doing it more by people actually scanning in rather than just selling the tickets. But either way, for Ireland, there's nothing really much to pick apart in terms of which games get more and which games get less, because every single one is absolutely sold out. So, yeah. Moving on. France. France is less consistent, kind of surprisingly. France's capacity, they're at 91% of capacity in 2016. It jumps up to 95% in 2017. It dips to 87% of capacity in 2018, 86%, and then 81% in 2020. I should have mentioned at the start that I'm not doing a total attendance per year because they vary as to the amount of home games they play each year. One year it's 3 home games, next year it's 2 home games, then 3, then 2, then 3, then 2. But for France, it's been a slightly inconsistent one. I must admit there's one game that they played in 2019. Was it 2018 against Italy, where they played in Marseille rather than the Stade de France. The Stade de France has a capacity of 81,338, but the one at Marseille, which I did adjust the calculations for that one, is 67,394. So, yeah. France, I was wondering if it's maybe years they're doing well or years they're doing poorly. I mean, this year they were doing all right, but they're actually only at 81, but they wouldn't have known they were doing all right until they beat England in that first game, I suppose. They've come 5th, 3rd, 4th, and 4th, so there's not been a lot to shout about in terms of French fans getting out. The games that have really lowered the attendance, 2016 was Italy. They got 64,000 for 79%. Scotland, Wales, they got good numbers in the following year. Again, in that game at Marseille against Italy in 2018, there was 50,000, so 74% of the capacity. I guess that's a slightly lower one. Wales in 2019, they only got 60,000 out of 80,000, 81,000, and then lastly this year was a particularly low one. I mean, maybe that's related to COVID kind of stopping people traveling. I'm not sure if it was back in that time, but for 2020, 52,000 people saw the game against Italy, which is only 64% of capacity. So it does bring the numbers down a bit. So again, maybe Italy is a little bit of a common factor in some of the lowest games being when the Italians were playing. Maybe it's less home fans wanting to get out and watch the Italians. Maybe it's fewer Italian fans traveling. I'm not sure. You guys have been to the games. Will be able to give us a bit more kind of insight into those numbers for the French. Interestingly, though, I'm not sure how they're doing their calculations either, because their calculations always tend to end in an even number. Like against Italy, 52,000. The previous year against Scotland, 80,000. Exactly 80,000. And then the same year against Wales, 60,000. Exact. So they never have a particular... They just seem to round it up or round it down. I'm not quite sure. For Scotland, Scotland is the same as Ireland in terms of every single game is 100% at Murrayfield. I can only assume, it's 60... Oh, actually, no, I'm mistaken. I forgot. One of the years, somehow, in 2016... they actually exceeded capacity, 101%. I tell a lie. Every other year, every single game was 67,144. Every game without fail, except for the France game in 2016, which was 67,500. So somehow they managed to get more people through the doors, apparently. I'm not quite sure how that works. But Scotland's numbers are very good. Again, I can only assume it's based on tickets sold, because every single game is listed with the exact same number. But yeah, good that all the Italian tickets sell out. So good news for the game. The Italians, and how much are they going to bring the stats down for the Six Nations overall? Remember, they play at the Stadio Olimpico, which has 72,698 capacity. In 2016, the average was 68,860, so 95% for the Italians in that first year. So good numbers. However, the following year, average of 47,651. That drops us down to 66%. The following year bumps back up a bit, 84%. Year after that, 63. And the one after that is 75. Which, again, I don't think are terrible numbers, seeing as they've come 6th, 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 and 6th. Well, this final year is not over yet, but at the minute they're coming 6th. Interestingly, it seems to be England and Scotland that they always get very good crowds for. Again, I'm not sure if it's travelling Scottish fans, English fans, maybe there's a lot of expats based in Italy, I'm not sure. But also, interestingly, the years where they play Wales really bring down their numbers. Again, I've only looked at a handful of years, only 5 years, but in 2016, they played Wales, got 40,986, so 56% of capacity. When they played Ireland, they had about 10,000 more, and when they played France, 11,000 more. When they played Wales in 2019, they only got 38,700, so 53% of capacity, so really brought it down, whereas Ireland and France, again, were at 68 and 67% of capacity. So do Welsh fans not travel to Italy? Do Italians not want to see them play Wales? Again, not sure. It just seems to be a trend. The years where they've played Wales, the numbers seem to be brought down. They are like outliers in terms of the average gate take for those years. But interestingly, their numbers are very different every year, very specific. There's not like a pattern for the most part where they sell the exact same amount of tickets per game. And lastly, England's numbers, to be fair, are pretty good. You've got 100, 100, 100, 100, and 99. So almost the perfect run, but not quite. And again, they've done pretty well in the Six Nations over the last 5 years. First, fifth, second, and they are in the moment leading the way in 2020. The only ones that have kind of brought them down, I guess, this year, they were at 99% for both games, if you can call that bringing it down. Not really. 81,476 and 81,522 for the games against Ireland, and Wales capacity 82,000 at Twickenham. So yeah, England's numbers are also pretty consistent. How does that leave the Six Nations overall? I mean, overall, that's painting a pretty good picture. I'm a guy who watches Rugby Championship, and it is going to be interesting to go back and compare those numbers to these ones at some point. I thought I would start with the Six Nations because I know their numbers are known for being quite good. In terms of the actual attendance, I didn't want to really look too much at year by year because I thought, the stadium sizes are changing. The years where Ireland play 3 games compared to a country with a bigger stadium, it could be 50,000 to 80,000. It's going to be quite different, but there's actually not a whole lot of variation. Thus far, the total number of fans that have attended is 727,000 for 2020. Every other year, like 97,000, 99,000, 975,000, 991,000, 996,000, and a million in 2016. So there's not a great deal of variation. The total attendance numbers, even though there's variations in stadium sizes from year to year, are pretty similar across the board. It does leave, though, with the total, with the Italians kind of bringing up their numbers here. Likewise, the French having one of their better years in 2016. That's your best year with an average of 97%, 92% in that year, 94% in that year, 91, which is your worst year, and then 93 thus far this year. they're pretty good numbers. They're pretty good numbers. I mean, if you're in school and you get 91% in your exam and you're the last guy in your class, that's pretty harsh. Interesting that it was a Rugby World Cup year that had the lowest numbers. Maybe people were saving their money for a trip to Japan. Not quite sure. Because it was a pretty good Six Nations in 2019, wasn't it? So, yeah, it's an interesting one. I can't imagine the Rugby Championship is going to get too close. I did choose percentages because that's going to be the main thing we'll be able to compare, because the Rugby Championships grounds move from year to year. They don't always play at the same grounds, and different number of games and whatnot. So the average attendance is going to have to be the one we go by. So average over the last 5 years has been 94%, which is pretty good. And I mean, I know the Italians kind of get a bit of grief from other Six Nations fans anyway, but some of their numbers are the one that's dragging the Six Nations down a bit. I mean, the French, again, if you're putting it into that school context, they're a solid student, man. Getting 80s is pretty good, at least at my school. But they're in the class with some proper geniuses. So, it's an interesting look. I guess a few connections, like Italy hosting Wales doesn't seem to do particularly well. The other teams hosting Italy, sometimes they always sell out, like Scotland and Ireland. Other times they don't quite draw as many fans. But, you guys let me know your thoughts. Do you think these numbers are, like especially with Ireland and Scotland, do you think they're based on tickets sold? Because there has to be people who don't make it through the games, to the games. I think these numbers are pretty healthy overall. It's not like a huge increase. I guess you could say maybe France's numbers are a touch worrying at 81% thus far. But again, I think the team they've got now is probably going to draw in more fans once we get back underway. Italy's fans, for a team which has finished dead last every year, again, I think that's relatively loyal, man. It's a big ground to fill. But England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales all pulling in almost perfect numbers. So no huge surprises there, but still an interesting look. I will compare to the Rugby Championship at some point, and I can't imagine we're going to get close. But anyway, you guys let me know your thoughts, and I'll talk to you again soon. See you later.